Hey everyone, my name is Erika. I'm one of our teaching pastors here on staff. Welcome to our online campus. I am so glad that you're here with us. Along with being one of our teaching pastors here on staff, I have the distinct privilege, really, of getting to be our student ministry pastor out at our Graham campus. I get to walk alongside students and families as they are navigating all of the growing up things. First days of school, heartbreak, driving, what do we do for college, all of the things. And one of the things that I love getting to be part of the most is talking with students as they dream about their future. Do they want to go to college? Do they want to jump right into the workforce? Where do they want to live? Do they want to be married? Do they not want to get married? Do they want to have kids? Do they not want to have kids? Do they want to go on crazy trips? Like whatever it is, we get to talk, we get to dream. And it's so fun to get to hear their answers and their thoughts and their responses to all of those things. Fuller Youth Institute, an institute that is all about helping churches disciple the next generation, has realized that as we walk alongside students, there are three main questions that students are asking. Even if they don't ask them in these exact words, the questions, the things that they're figuring out, all surround these three questions. Who am I? Where do I fit? And what difference can I make? The next generation is not the first group of people to ever ask this question. You asked yourself these questions if you're watching this and you're an adult. You felt vexed and overwhelmed as a young adult as you try to figure out how to navigate the world. You felt stressed as a teenager trying to be like, what do I do next? How do I handle this? And I think that as adults, we do a terrible job then of continuing to ask these questions. When we stop asking these questions, who am I? Where do I fit? What difference can I make? We stop paying attention to what God might be doing in our midst. We miss the beauty of what's happening around us because I think when we stop asking these questions, our lives just kind of go on autopilot. We just say, I've just been doing the same thing I've always been doing. And I think that there's something better out there for all of us. I think the way that we answer these questions also as adults really, really matters. So these three questions are what we are going to walk through in this series. We want to talk about each of these, but honestly, we want to also be able to talk about them through the lens of what does it look like to invest in the next generation. Here at Rainier View, we want to be a place where Jesus is real for everybody. And so we have to look at some of the really unique ways that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to be answering these questions and how we can support them really, really well. And so in this series, we don't want to just talk about all of those things. We want you to actually be able to hear from teenagers. So we reached out to our friend Eddie. Eddie's preached here a couple times. He is a leader in Young Life in the Lakewood area. And I said, hey, Eddie, could you bring a student? And I'll bring a couple students. And I would just love to be able to talk to some teenagers around some of these questions. So that's what we're going to do. So today, we're going to watch a little video. We didn't directly ask students, how do you answer the question, who am I? But we asked them some questions kind of around that topic and gave them some space to talk and share their thoughts. Let's watch. Okay, so we want to just ask some questions and get to hear your thoughts about life and the world. So this first set of questions falls under this category of questions of kind of who am I? And that is such like a broad thing, and adults are going to ask that question their whole life, so don't feel like you have to, like have all of the answers and just really feel like you know everything right now. But the first question that we want to ask you guys is like, what do you think about the world? I don't care. Any of you can go.
Oh, okay. That's a super broad question, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think the world on paper is very different from the world that I'm living in, where like I'm just an upper class high schooler living in my own nice little town and enjoying my life, just running around doing fun stuff. But then you look at the news and there's obviously a very different portrayal of like, oh, the world might end by 2050. Oh yeah, we're having conflicts with different countries and everything's, just absolutely falling apart. And it's very different from the world that I guess we're probably all living in, just in like Lakewood, Silicon area, especially probably Eddie. He's living his best life right now.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I would say like the world is like huge, but like small at the same time.
Okay.
Because I'll be like talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, you know this person? Oh yeah, we're friends." I'm like, but there you
Yeah.
go, like I know them from two completely different places. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Zane, what do you think about the world?
I think it's kind of like Kirby said, but like I think the world could have better leadership. Like I think I think if our leader just like thought a little bit more, like I feel like the world would change
If all of the leaders in all of the
Yeah.
world work together?
yes.
Yeah.
it would definitely change.
It heightens the old leadership lesson. Shout out to John Maxwell. Everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yeah.
So you're hitting the nail on the head, Zane.
Yeah, you really are. Okay, so you're like the world feels so big but also small at the same time, and you're like, my world, your world feels small and connected, and then you kind of look at the bigger picture and you're like,
Very different.
oh my
very
gosh,
different.
oh no. So what do you think about, like, especially for you two, you're a little closer to graduation, you're a little closer to like becoming an adult. So what do you think about when that time comes that you're kind of like, ooh, I've made that switch from being a high schooler to being an adult? How do you feel when you think about that?
I answered first last time.
Probably, I don't know. I feel like I would be nervous.
Yeah.
Just, taxes and everything. I'm like, no, thank you.
Look, taxes. That's the most stressful night where I'm like,
Oh, thanks, Erika.
look, I'm sorry. I want to be honest here.
Hey, keep it a buck. Hey, every year my wife and I we have to have a talk before we start our taxes because we will get in an argument at some point, and we just need to remind ourselves it's gonna happen. It's okay that it happens. Let's keep it pushing.
Remind each other of like your marriage vows.
Exactly.
Like we said better or worse,
I
baby.
know this is
Here's-
the worst.
Shoot. I had something I was going to say. I forgot. I don't know. There's a lot of pressure where like we're moving towards graduation, and once we graduate, a lot of people are saying like you've graduated, you've entered the real world, like the real world I was talking about earlier, where like everything might end by 2050, and a lot of negative news. And I think the biggest push for us is just to try and keep it as positive as possible, to do everything we can to hold on to like the small, more connected world we had as moving through our teenagers and especially our childhood years. And I think to abandon that world would just to accept all the negativity that's being thrown at us and just say, all right, this is the world I'm living in now. Instead of just, taking the small connected area that we already know we're going to live in for the rest of our life and then just trying to push that out into like the big adult world that we're being thrust into.
Yeah, you want to try to still like believe the best about the world and the people you encounter.
Because most likely, no matter what, I'm still going to have like a smaller connected group of friends and a group, my family especially. And so we're all going to be together no matter what for the rest of my life. So why would I abandon that just because I'm being told that that is going to change?
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about growing up?
It's it makes me nervous to like grow up because like you think that like growing up is going to get easier and easier,
Yeah.
but like as you grow up it starts to get tougher and you have more responsibilities, and it's just like you have a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
which causes like stress and anger. And I think growing up is just a tedious process.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Can you unpack a little bit more when you were like, yeah, we need to listen when people when kids push back?
Yeah. Well, let me ask this question before I say anything. How do you all feel? Do you all feel like the adults in your life listen when you have something to share? And yes or no, do you feel like it? And if so, yes or no, does that make you feel? How does that make you feel like you're valued, you're understood? What would you say?
Well, it depends on like which adults you let into your life.
Yeah.
Like if you let the right adults into your life, then I feel like they listen to you.
Yeah.
I feel like it really just depends on the situation and like who it is, because like it could be something like silly or dumb, but then it could also be something like serious
Yeah.
and like
Yeah, that's good, Zane. That's good.
I gotta say, I think it all depends on the maturity of the adult.
Yeah.
Because not you don't just become an adult and automatically become mature. I guarantee there are probably some 25-year-olds that Zane is more mature and more smarter. He's probably smarter also.
There are like
than-
50-year-olds that he would
Holla.
be more mature than.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
the more mature that a person is, the more likely they are to listen to people that are supposedly like beneath them, especially where where we're sitting a full generation beneath our parents and like a lot of adults above us, and so for them to want to listen and want to hear what we have to say about any one given thing, I think that shows a lot of maturity of any adult, and then any adult that isn't willing to listen and isn't willing to just hear what we have to say is really just trying to shut off anything that could be seen as like demeaning their position, which is just a big sign of immaturity. So I think you just have to find the right adults.
And really what it comes down to with Gen Z is you all are very self-aware. You're very self-aware. I think the area where you have weakness still, and we all have weakness. I'm a millennial. Someone said I'm a geriatric millennial, which because I know I was like, come on now, come on, Crystal. Yeah, us older millennials out there. Yeah, come on now. Anyway, late 30s, early 40s. That's where we're at. The area where I feel like so many of my friends who are Gen Z, where they're still working on, is it's discernment. Is you're really aware of the temperature in the room, but you have no idea how to like adjust it, is how I would describe it. You're aware of hey, what's going on, maybe even why it's going on, but you're still trying to figure out how do I navigate through these moments in life. And I think that's part of the reason why like I really think we should let you have pushback, is because the only way you're going to be able to figure out how to solve the issues and the problems of life isn't just to say, I have a problem, what do I do? Well, it's to have conversation and dialogue with people who've been ahead of you, with people who are older than you, with people who have gone through some of the things you've gone through. But they also have the perspective to remind you that like just because life feels like it's about to fall apart, you're gonna be okay. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was 21 and starting in ministry, one of my mentors said, Eddie, when you feel like life's about to fall apart, remember, it's going to be okay. You're just 21. This is not the worst thing that's going to happen to you. This is not the hardest thing. And it's just a helpful reminder that when you're 17, life can feel so immediate. And so like everything in this moment rides or die on what I decide to do. And the reality is it's usually not true. It's usually not true. But I think it's important to let you talk about that, feel that, push back with Erika, myself, and other adults so you can figure it out. All right, I talk too much.
No, Eddie, we are grateful to hear your wisdom. There's a reason that we were like, let's bring Eddie on for this too, because you have a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm sitting here learning as I am sitting with all of you. So thanks for sharing. That day was seriously some of the most fun I have had with students. We could have talked for literal hours and just kept going. They had such incredible answers, and it was so great to be able to hear from them. I have so much empathy for students. They are in this generation, in this space that has no idea what it is like to live in a world without smartphones. They have no idea what it is like to live in a world without social media, where everyone is constantly commenting, talking, and posting about all of these things. They have access to all of the information in the world. They have access to the exact same information that every single adult has. But maturity is something that grows over time. And so they know all of these things, but they don't always know what to do with it. And one of the things that breaks my heart the most for my students is that when they go home from school at the end of the day, things like bullying and snide comments from classmates, they don't stop anymore. I was picked on in school. I was super tall. I did not look like I belonged. I'm your classic firstborn goody two shoes type kid. So it made me kind of an easy target in a lot of ways. But when I went home at the end of the day, I didn't have to worry about what other people were saying or thinking about me. My parents didn't let me get social media until way late in high school. I didn't have a phone that could access the internet until I was in college. Like, I didn't have to stress about that stuff. Most adults today, when they went home at the end of the day, it was done. But for students today, they open Instagram, they open TikTok, they see what is happening in the world even when they are not a part of it. People can text them mean, hurtful, unkind things at any given time, and they can just see it. They are having to navigate some really tough roads. And when I talk with parents about it, some of them are like, so I should never let them have the internet, right? Like they should just never have a cell phone, or can I just keep them in my home forever? Some parents are like, well, might as well let them experience the worst that the world has to offer when I can at least walk through it with them. All of those feel like really extreme answers and responses, and I can see the heart and the validity behind it. But I think a way to walk with upcoming generations through answering this question of who am I, how they navigate their life, there is a way less extreme approach, but it's going to actually require a lot more work for us as adults. We have to help students answer the question, who am I, through the lens of Jesus and no other way. There, in the book of Ephesians, it's a book in the Bible, and it's not actually a book, it's a letter. It's a letter written by Paul to the church in Ephesus, and that's where we're first going to look today in the Bible together. So we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 1. So you can flip there, swipe there, tap there. If you want to download a free, awesome, wonderful tool and resource, there is an app called YouVersion, or the Bible app. And then you can have that on your device at all times. It is such a great resource. But Ephesians, this letter is written to the church in Ephesus. And Ephesus is a huge city, and it is multi-ethnic, and it has a church in its city that is doing incredible work of helping people know and follow Jesus. And this letter is kind of broken into two sections. It first is focusing on what is the gospel, and then it's like, how do we live in light of the gospel? And so right out of the gate, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, this is how Paul, this is like what he is saying to his people shortly after just being like, hey, how are you? So great to write you a letter again. This is what he says. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance and with his pleasure and will. There are two key truths here that I think are going to be so helpful as we walk this road and answer this question of who am I. Number one, we are chosen. Being a teenager is the time of life where we are all waiting to be chosen. We are waiting to be chosen for PE teams, to like totally like crush it at dodgeball. We are hoping to be chosen for plays, musicals, bands. We are hoping and praying that someone will pick us to go to a dance, to be part of what everyone else is doing. But from before we ever even enter the world, we are chosen by God. That is a game changer, and that is not something that is going to go away, and that is not something that we can earn or lose. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, we are chosen, which leads us to the second truth, which is that salvation comes through Jesus. Jesus came to earth, lived a perfect life, died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins, was buried, rose on the third day, ascended into heaven. It is miracle upon miracle upon miracle, and all of that is what saves us. It can be so overwhelming to feel like you have to be amazing and incredible all of the time. And that is what so many people feel. But have you ever paused to realize what a relief it is that you don't secure your salvation? It is through what Jesus did. So if each of us is chosen, all of us are loved by God. And if our being loved and wanting to be secure in that is all done through Jesus, then helping the next generation answer the question, who am I, comes down to this bottom line. The next generation needs to hear at church that there is nothing that they can do that will make them more enough or less enough. When they show up in our buildings, when they walk into homes that are being led by people who love Jesus, how we talk to them about what they are in pursuit of, how they view themselves, it matters so, so, so much. Their identity does not have to be wrapped up into the labels that they give themselves or what other people label them. We get to show them that what matters is how God sees them. That is the most important label, and that is how they get to live. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we help the next generation define themselves by God's love and nothing else? Here's the trickier part for us. As adults, we have to model it. As people who have already said yes to following Jesus, whether you are a teenager or you are an adult, we have to model that this is actually something that we believe. We have to live differently, and we have to show others around us what that looks like. And you get to do that for the next generation. And this requires so much more of us than an extreme approach to parenting or volunteering our time or using the right words or checking up on someone else's social media. It requires that we dig deep. It requires that we build a foundational relationship with God. And here's the deal. If you are sitting there today and you're like, that sounds so nice, but I think I've missed my window, I've missed my chance, you have not. It is never too late to begin to say yes to following Jesus. It is never too late to say, I have said yes to Jesus. I believe that salvation comes through Jesus. I'm ready today to actually live differently because of that. I want to be able to answer the question, who am I, through that lens. And here's what that could look like for us. In the Gospels, there are 4 books of the Bible that tell us about what Jesus' time on earth was like. And in John chapter 6, which is where we're going to be together for a little while longer, it's where we're going to camp out for some time. In John chapter 6, Jesus is traveling and he's teaching and he's healing, and he goes to this mountainside and he looks out and he sees that all of these people have shown up to learn from him. And there's so many people that he gets one of his disciples, he grabs Philip, and he's like, hey, this is what he says in John chapter 6, verse 5. Where shall we buy bread for all of these people to eat? He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each to have one bite. Now, I'm going to share something, and it's going to be shocking, I'm sure. I'm not super familiar with how first century economics worked. I know, you're shocked, absolutely baffled. So instead, I did some digging and I looked and I figured out this is the current average income in Pierce County. It is between $36,836 and $39,390. That is the current average income, okay? That would mean that if we were in a similar situation today, we would be spending somewhere between $18,000 and $19,000 to feed everyone who had shown up for just one meal. Everyone who had shown up to hear from Jesus. That is a lot of money. And so admittedly, the disciples are panicking a little bit. Jesus has invited them into being part of solving the problems around them, providing for, caring, and loving the people around. And they're feeling a little overwhelmed at the size of this, because sometimes when God invites us into stuff, we feel a little overwhelmed at first. But we feel that way all the time. Overwhelmed at everything that is coming our way, and we are not quite sure how to handle it. And I think that we can see from some of the other people in this story some things that we can model for ourselves. This verse 8. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will that go among so many? I do chuckle because it does kind of sound like the disciples' solution to this problem was like, how about we steal a kid's lunch? That's not, I don't think that's actually what happened. I'm sure that someone overheard and the boy was like, hey, I can help. Here's what I have to offer. But it's kind of this like, I have something to offer. The problem feels overwhelming and I'm not quite sure what to do. It's not much, but it is the best that I can do. Verse 10 says, Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there, which means that there were more women and children. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. When anyone asks the question, who am I? And we root the answer to that in our own accomplishments or accolades, if that is rooted in what we think about ourselves, the labels that other people have given, we are missing it. But when we answer the question, who am I? And we say, I am someone who is loved, and I show up and I give my best to Jesus, and I wait to see what he will do with it, that is a much better answer. That is a way less scary answer. That is an answer that allows for flourishing and growth. When we say, I am a person who is known and loved and created by God, and I will give my best, but I know that you will do something more, that is living in such a way that we are expectantly excited about what Jesus is going to do. This little boy, the disciples, they said, hey, Jesus, the best that we can offer you right now is a small amount of fish and a small amount of bread. And everyone who was there was more than fed. Everyone who showed up there had what they needed, and then there was stuff left over. When we get to live just saying, here you go, Jesus, you do something better with this, it takes the pressure off of us to be perfect. And it instead becomes about us just bringing an offering to God who already loves us, who has already chosen us. We don't have to be in control anymore. We are trusting that God is more in control, that he will do more than we could ever imagine. As someone who has lived with the pressure of feeling like I have to do everything amazingly and perfectly all of the time, as I have learned to live this way, it has taken so much pressure off and allowed me to actually have a relationship with God, not just feeling like he is waiting for me to do something wonderful. And we can hear these truths. They can sit in our brain. There can be helpful reminders strategically placed around us. It can begin to soften our hearts. But I think that when we can use our brains and our hearts and our bodies to begin to actually practice the things that God calls us to, things will change even faster. We will be able to answer questions in such a better way. And so if the next generation needs to hear at church that there is nothing they can do or be that will make them more enough or less enough, then we need to be a group of people who are really good at practicing Sabbath. And Sabbath is kind of like, you're like, what? That is kind of a weird word. That's not a word we use very often. Sabbath is one day that is full of worship and rest and fun. It is a day where we do not try to control everything, the outcomes, the circumstances that surrounds us. It is a day where we do not try to hustle or strive to make progress, to move on to the next thing. It is a day where we are saying, God, you are in control. God, you are powerful. I have brought my best. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with it. But I know that I am not in control of everything. And so I'm going to trust you. And maybe a whole day you're like, too much. Cannot do it. Start with an hour where you turn your phone off, where you sit and you rest and you think about the things of God and you worship, and you can feel some deep, good rest and peace in your soul. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it is a night, maybe it is a morning. Start small, but begin to let that grow. Because then it allows us to say, who am I? Well, I am not a person who has to be on 24/7. I can be a person who rests. And so many times I talk to adults and I'm like, hey, so, they're telling me all these things that are going on. And I'm like, but are you Sabbathing? Are you resting? Are you letting God? And they're like, oh, I could never take that time. I could never take that space. When we as adults say that, we are not modeling well for teenagers and the next generation. We are not modeling well how to live, trusting and believing that God is far more loving and far more powerful than we could ever fathom. That when we show up and bring our best, Jesus will do so much more with that. And so that is your challenge this week. Begin to practice Sabbath. It is something that will take time. It is something that will grow over time. But you will be amazed at what happens when you no longer define yourself, when you no longer answer the question of who am I by everybody else, and instead you answer it by God and what he has already done and what he has already said about you.